Today on the show, should you use this or this for real estate photography? Today we're talking all about photography. Don't go anywhere because real estate gold starts now. Good morning, everybody. So today we are talking all about photography. And so one of the questions we get asked a lot is, can you use a smartphone for your real estate photography? And that's a little bit of a tricky question because usually I would say no, but smartphones today, they have such amazing cameras that can you actually use them for real estate photography? So there's two key differences between a smartphone and something like a DSLR, and that is how those two cameras process the images. So a smartphone will basically just shoot in JPEG format. And a JPEG, if you're not really sure what a JPEG really is, a JPEG is a compressed file. So it's a smaller file that is easily shareable on other platforms. So, if you need to email a picture, JPEG. If you need to post something online, JPEG. So it's a shareable format. The problem with it is that it compresses all that information so you don't have access to as much. A DSLR shoots in a file format called RAW. And what a RAW file can do is it basically stores all the information that was captured by the camera's sensor. So the difference with that is when you go into a editing software, you've got a full range of everything that sensor captured that you can make changes to. So let's say that you took a picture of a house and it accidentally, was underexposed. So the picture was way too dark. Well, you can go into that software after the fact and increase that exposure so you get a better picture. So the holy trinity of photography composes of three basic things, and that is aperture, shutter speed, and ISO. So let's break those down and kind of explain what each one does. So aperture basically is similar to the iris of your eye, and it basically controls the depth of field. So the smaller the number, it's usually recorded in an f-stop. So, f-stop 1.2 to 1.4, you're going to have a really nice blurry background that you commonly see with portrait photography. But when it comes to real estate, you want to shoot at a much higher aperture setting because you want everything to be in focus. So if you kind of picture, a long hallway, at the end of the hallway is a bedroom you want to see everything. So you want to shoot at a higher f-stop rating. So the last one is ISO, and ISO is what basically the camera's sensor, how sensitive that sensor is. So how do you use all three of these together? Well, I always start with the aperture. What do I want the aperture setting to be? And do I want a blurry background? Do I want everything to be in focus? That kind of gives me a starting point. The next one is for consideration is what is the subject that I'm shooting. If it's a property or a landscape, then I'm probably going to use a tripod. You're not going to have anything moving, so I don't really need to worry about the ISO. So I'll go ahead and set that to the lowest possible setting I can, because if you increase the ISO too much, you'll start getting some grainy and pixelated images. So I always try to shoot as low of an ISO as I possibly can. the next one is the shutter speed, and the shutter kind of works like blinking. So how much light is actually coming into that camera? So with the shutter speed, if it's on a tripod, you don't really have to worry about it as long as the subject's not moving. So you can use really long exposures to get that picture exposed properly. If you're shooting handheld, or you've got a really, an active shot, so, like a sporting event or something, you want to shoot at a much lower, at a faster shutter speed. So, like, for handheld, I wouldn't go above anything more than 1/60th of a second. Because if you go any higher, you're going to introduce some motion blur. So that's kind of how you kind of use all three of those to get a properly exposed picture, and that's kind of how photography works. So don't go anywhere. We will be right back after this.
In Tennessee, the seasons come and go. But our season never ends. To be the best, it takes an entire team working together for a common goal. The McRae Real Estate Group has a mission of changing the real estate industry. We value our clients and believe in serving with humble integrity. We are data-driven and use science to influence our decision-making. Northeast Tennessee is our home, and home starts with us.
And we are back. So, one thing I didn't mention this morning is that I am actually coming to you live from Daytona Beach, Florida. So, I've got Micah here on standby. So, we're going to bring him in and see if he can contribute any to our photography conversation. Good morning.
I don't know how much more I'm going to be
sir.
able to contribute.
So today on the show, we're talking all about photography, and what are some of the main takeaways? Let's start from the agent side of things. What are some things that you specifically look for as an agent and broker in real estate photography?
I mean, I personally like to see high quality photography done on properties. We are marketing other people's properties to get as much attention as possible. Granted, if you're really horrible at pictures, that gets attention too, but it's not the kind that you want on a property. Um, but since we like to be professionals in our field, and that's what we're shooting for as an office and even as agents individually. Um, we really like to see the best possible pictures that you can take. And in a lot of cases, there are people that are talented with phones that can edit pictures really well. And like you were talking about earlier, a lot of phones have these crazy megapixels that they're capable of shooting in today. That when I first started this, it was a flip phone, and you were, lucky if you got a 280 by 360 or whatever size that was back then. Um, and you couldn't do anything with those kind of things. So if you shot, property pictures on that, you were probably never going to sell it. You're going to end up as a meme or something in the future. Um, so we're really looking at having as much of a professional set of pictures, whether it's photography, video, any of that kind of stuff. We want as much of a professionalism that we can possibly implement. That includes even upgrading our own equipment in house, for those pictures. So one thing that we do to try to keep that quality as high as possible and uniform across the entire brokerage and all of our sister offices, blah blah blah. We're looking at having an in-house photographer that stays and has the same quality all the way across. That way, it's not somebody just taking pictures with a cell phone. That way, we've got somebody that can professionally edit these pictures, even if somebody is good enough to do it with a cell phone. We're still capable of editing them, making them get as best as possible, putting that property in the best viewpoint or view that we can. Um, that's sort of our standpoint on it. Do I care if it's a phone per se? No. Um, if somebody's good enough with the phone that can give you the kind of pictures that you can work with in your particular case, um, I'm okay with that, but it has to be something that's uniform, that we all adhere to. We want a standard.
Yeah, and there's been times when I've been out in the field, taking pictures of a property, and all of a sudden you think you've charged the battery up long enough, or you've got enough juice to kind of get you through, and all of a sudden, it dies on you. And I've pulled out my phone and kind of finished the project, and it works okay. And one thing that I didn't mention earlier is that these smartphones are exceptional at video. So I don't really like using it for photography per se, but video they do extremely well.
Yep.
And one of the features that a lot of your newer smartphones have in it is called HDR, and it's a technique that I use with the DSLR, but it stands for high dynamic range. So basically, these smartphones, and whenever I do it, I have to kind of do it manually, but it takes a dark exposure, a proper exposure, and a high exposure, so a really bright picture, and it kind of merges all those together to give you. It allows you to kind of see what you normally see in a picture. So the way your eyes work, it kind of works the same way. So from one of the other things that I see a lot is you need to really kind of be careful if you're going to hire photography out. You need to kind of be careful and use a photographer that knows what they're doing when it comes to real estate photography.
Yep.
Because if they basically, are used to shooting weddings and just portrait photography, there's two different styles of photography. And, you want, sometimes they try to make a property look like it's something that it's really not. And, for our side of things, the way I look at a property is when I take pictures of it and these people see it online, I want them to feel when they show up to that property like they've already been there, that they're kind of walking into a familiar place.
Yeah, in the best light possible.
But sometimes I've seen a lot of photography where I guess they're trying to make it look like magazine quality, so they just kind of take their artistic license a little too far.
And in my opinion, even from a broker standpoint, when I look at that, when you've got a property that may be, I've seen them, and I'm not going to, of course, go into names or anything, but I've seen agents that are notorious for going in, taking pictures of a property, and completely changing the color of cabinets in the kitchen, changing colors of the walls. I mean, and they've done all this stuff to make this house look like it's something that it's not. And my personal opinion, it's misrepresentation of what you're doing, because you're trying to sell the property as the way it is. Unless you're doing a builder and he asks you to paint the walls a certain color because that's what he's going to paint them. You know, I don't really see a
Yeah,
good purpose in doing that, because when you get there, you're just like, yeah, I don't know what house we're in because it's not the one we saw pictures of.
yeah.
Top deal.
There's a difference between a rendered model for new construction versus going in and completely color correcting and changing colors of the entire property. Or the one that always kills me is when they take the sky in the front picture and they completely change it, just completely just wipe it out
Like,
and replace it, and it's like I can tell you what you've done. It's like I know that that's not what
yeah,
it really looks like. So let's go take it to the client's standpoint. What are some things that the client should ask about pictures, or what are some things that they need to know?
Well, I mean, I would look at it from the standpoint of if you're talking about a listing, for example, we'll start with that side. Somebody who's going to sell. Um, One, is that photographer going to shoot it with their cell phone? Because, and if they are, why? Because, yeah, they're great for selfies and stuff like that, but that's not a professional marketing tool. Um, Now, if the agent is just starting out and they're going to use a phone, but they can prove that they can edit the pictures and make them look really great, that kind of thing, by all means, go ahead and do that. I'm not knocking people who just want to shoot off a cell phone per se. Um, but if they're walking in there with a flip phone and going to take pictures, there's not a lot you can do about that. So I would probably ask them if they're going to, hire a professional photographer or that you want one to shoot these pictures. Yes, remember, it's still your listing, and yes, they're the professional, but there's also, I'm going to say, some form of a standard that needs to be there when you are taking pictures or marketing your property. You know, um, Shooting it with like an old flip phone is not going to be a good marketing technique, I don't think, from anybody's standpoint. So ask them to pay for a photographer, or ask them to do something to that effect. Or even if you've got a better phone, you take the pictures and send it to them and let them work with those. That's fine too. Um, but you need to make sure that there's a good quality picture that's going to be marketed and they're just not taking one to the front. I would say also make sure that there's a lot of interior, exterior pictures as well. Some of the best features of the house. What are some of the reasons that that person bought the house? And if that could be photographed, then photograph it. Because if it sold you, it's got to be able to. It's going to be something that somebody else will hopefully buy. So definitely accent those things that sold you on the property as well.
Yeah, one of the questions that I usually get asked the most, especially prior to listing a property, when it comes to the photography side, is they're kind of concerned about what they need to actually do to the property. And the
Yeah.
main thing is, if you're living there, it's your home, live in it. The only thing that I usually ask is just kind of keep everything decluttered, especially when it comes to like bathroom counters and kitchen counters. You just kind of straighten, tidy everything up, and you're good to go. If you've started, boxing things up because you're planning on trying to get prepared for moving, then try to stack those boxes
Shove them in the
up,
garage.
put them in a corner.
Yeah, or shove them in a garage. Shove them somewhere that we can take a picture without showing the boxes, for example. You may put those in a big closet that you use as a junk closet normally. Um, you may put them in the garage and one side of your garage against the wall, whatever, something that is understandable, but that we can still shoot around and explain. Now if you have like boxes all out in the middle of the floor and stuff like that, when you're taking pictures, then people aren't going to be able to see the actual house itself. It's not that you have stuff packed in boxes is really the issue. It's more or less we can't showcase what you're actually selling because it's your stuff's just there. And that's where their eyes are going to automatically get drawn to no matter what you try to do about it.
And usually, as the photographer, our team, I always ask the homeowner, hey, is it okay if I move some things around? But if I walk in and it's just you know boxes and boxes and boxes just scattered everywhere, sorry, but click, and just move on to the next room. It's I don't mind moving a few things around, but I am not a house cleaner. So when it comes to the buyer side, what are some things that they should kind of keep in mind when it comes to photography?
Well, one thing would be, if you've got a good agent, they're going to hopefully know what kind of, because I mean, let me back up a little bit. So when agents are really out there and they do a lot of business, whether it's first come or repeat or whatever, they start to gain a reputation of what they do and do not do. And like I mentioned before, I have a specific agent that I'm, again, not going to mention names, but they are well known for representing properties that don't actually aren't actually what they've got listed, right? So whenever, if I have a buyer or something like that, and they come in and say, well, I really like the color of those cabinets on this particular house, and if I happen to see that agent's name attached to it, I'll let them know that there's a good possibility that's not the right color, and we can still go look at it, obviously, but I try to get them to be realistic of what it could and could not be in that house, because this person's notoriously bad about changing full blown colors on stuff. He's not color correcting; they're literally changing the color, and that poses a problem when you've got a client that looks at something and says, "Hey, yeah, that looks awesome because I like this color scheme," or whatever. It doesn't matter if they can paint it and change it or not. They're going in with that expectation that that's what it's going to look like. And there's no justification for that kind of a color change. So, as an agent, it's my job to know the market. It's my job to also know how other people market properties, because I'm there to help and work for my client, and I will explain to them what people have a habit of doing or not doing, not talking bad about them, but just explaining that sometimes these pictures don't come across as the way that they should, and therefore don't get your expectations up to this is where it's at, when it could be really down here, top deal. But it's
Yeah,
worth looking at just to see and verify.
yeah, and I usually always tell my clients to say, look, if it looks too good to be true, then keep an open mind, but we need to kind of look at this property pretty close, because a lot of photographers that I've seen pictures of, they are kind of notorious for trying to hide things.
Yep.
So it's if it use the pictures to kind of determine if it's something you're interested in, but make sure when you're doing the actual walkthrough and the showing, take a close look at everything.
Yeah, it's our job as a listing agent to market the house in the best possible light, but at that same time, we're not supposed to be like hiding things either, right? So, you may not take a picture of a certain set of things, but you may explain it in the description that, hey, these kind of things exist. It's going to be quite obvious. I'm not going to take a picture of it, but I'll let you know that these things exist so that you're aware of it when you get there. And then, there's going to be some houses where you want to take these kind of pictures to explain the condition of a property. When we sold foreclosures and stuff like that, during 07 and 08, 09, 10, those kind of properties, you tried to shoot every aspect of the room so that the people that were looking at it were knowing what they were walking into. And there was times where we sold houses that we were like, hey, not safe to walk into. This house needs some serious care, or needs to be ripped down and rebuilt, whatever. And we would literally put those kind of things in the description for safety purposes. And we took pictures as best as we could. And sometimes we couldn't even walk into the houses. So we would take pictures on the outside and just explain, hey, we got one picture shooting through the doors and the windows, but there's not a whole lot I can do because there's not a floor, so I'm not going to be balance beaming trying to take pictures. So, we try to be as truthful as possible. Now, granted, do we want to market it and get it out there the best of our ability? Yes, we do. But there is a difference between putting a house in the best light and actually subterfuge, type situation. So as a buyer and a buyer's agent, you really want to make sure that people understand that, hey, if this house has TLC written in it, that's a very wide range of description of what could be wrong with the house. Because my idea of little TLC could be different than John's, for example, or somebody else's. So you have to have a wide scope of what those things could actually look like. But pictures are, very, very useful when they're used correctly and ethically. But there are times where they're not used either way. And you just have to know that when you're walking into properties as a buyer and a buyer's agent.
So let's go and check out our market report. So the first one we're going to take a look at is the absorption rate. So the absorption rate for April was 1.02 months. So 1.02 months, it's gone up a little bit, but it hasn't really changed a whole lot. Let's take a look at the days on market. So the days on market was 65 days. Our list ratio was 99.5%. And the average
So good.
price was $263,586. So the biggest change was that list to price ratio, which was 99.5%, which means, their properties are basically getting a full price offer.
Ask. Yep.
So that will do us for today. Tune in next month, first Monday of each month at 9 a.m. So thanks for watching, and we'll see you guys next time.
Have a good week.